very expensive.
Like that.
I will not brief for President Kibaki or any other person. But I think it was really a PR event just to raise awareness. You even recall when you were doing the census, you would get the PS of planning and top officials going to the president's home or going to Raila's home to do the actual counting.
Okay.
So, I mean, this from a communications perspective is just to raise awareness that there's a big shot who's registered and who are you back in the village not to.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, raise the PR, this is it. But it's just, for me, one book. They could have just taken the book that they used for people in the nearest polling station to KICC would have been, I don't know, Moy Avenue Primary School. Take the same book and I don't know. Anyway, let me understand. Yes, I'm not trying to be, pedestrian about it, but it's just, one book.
But it's important to appreciate that, well, the Kenyan law says that we are equal, but do you really think we are equal?
No. No, not if you read George Orwell's book. We certainly are not equal. Not according
so Kibaki
to him.
would not go all the way to Othaya to go and register and come back here.
When we talk about, communications and PR and sometimes how we treat high-ranking individuals, what do you think about this incident? For the Great Lakes Summit, we had, presidents in the country. One of them was the president of the Central African Republic.
Whose name you probably don't know.
Michel Djotodia. I think, yes, whose name I probably don't know. But then, they've had, a couple of coups, and that's not one of the most popular countries on the continent, regardless.
Egypt has had a similar number of coups.
There you go. And now Morsi, a few years from now, But anyway, let's get to it. He was made to wait for about an hour in his plane on the runway. Now they're saying, first it was not intentional. It was reported that it was not clear which individual would go and, receive him. And now Karanja Kibicho, who's the Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary, is saying that there's a different protocol for first-time visiting heads of state, and it requires longer clearances.
As you'd say, as we were told in high school, you would easily tell the PS to go tell that to the birds. There is no way you would say that a president coming to Kenya, that because he's the first time, so he's a freshman or a mono, is going to be treated differently. Can you imagine, say, this man we don't like, Kenyans don't like, President Obama coming to Kenya, you'll keep him at the airport for 1 hour because he's coming to Kenya for the very first time? I think that's unacceptable. Chances are, this gentleman was invited, and maybe Kenya doesn't even have an embassy in that country. So he was invited, and they were not really aware. They were not sure that was coming. He was probably not in the schedule. That's why there was nobody to receive him at the airport. And I hope that the president has offered, a written apology to the president, because that's not the way to treat a president.
Right.
Even if he's in charge of a country with only 100,000 people, it's unacceptable. Can you imagine President Kenyatta going to this particular country? Because if he does, he'll be at the airport for 3 hours.
Right. Because also he's been there for the first time, and of course their clearances take a longer time. Okay.
I mean, we saw after the president was sworn in, he went to Uganda, Tanzania. Did he spend 1 hour at the airport because he's, a first-time visitor? I think the explanation by the PS doesn't fly, and that's not good for our diplomacy. We really need to apologize, and we need to see the PS or the cabinet secretary, and indeed the president himself, giving a serious apology. That's unacceptable, because it means that, maybe we go back to the animal farm, that we have presidents and some are more senior than others. I mean, can you imagine?
Even for presidents it applies, eh?
Yeah, I mean, if you say you get the president for China who will come to Kenya for the first time, you'll keep him at the airport for 1 hour.
Certainly
that there are protocols, you need to take fingerprints and everything else. I mean, what will you be doing at the airport for 1 hour? Even as a normal traveler, when you come in, you're checking in. I mean, unless you come in a plane which carries 1,000 guys, what will you be doing at the
for 1 hour?
That's really unacceptable.
That's right.
And the PS and Foreign Affairs must not take, presidents for granted, because in international protocol, a president is supposed to be treated as a president.
And if he was invited, whether or not on that scale, on the animal farm, if they're the pigs and the whatnot, I mean, if he was invited, then let's treat him well. If he wasn't invited, then I suppose he wouldn't even have touched down, at JKI or even entered Kenyan airspace. But the fact that we invited him means, we treat him, as an invited person. But I don't know, something about this just doesn't sound
and I think that president probably accepts his role in society. I would imagine if it was, say, Zuma coming to Kenya for the first time, you mistreat him, he'll probably ask his pilot, let's go back home. And the two countries would suffer. Can you imagine Kenya doing this to the Nigerian man called Goodluck Jonathan? I mean, this is really bad. It's Or maybe they're really trying to settle down, and there are some manuals they haven't gone through how to receive presidents from
really? But
small
how
countries.
have they been received? Well, I think if
From
you're
small
receiving,
countries.
oh, okay, from yeah, like we said, even presidents, maybe, you know, Animal Farm applies. Still on page 5 of the Daily Nation today. Now, members of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission have expressed concerns over how they feel the report will be handled in Parliament. According to Tekna Namachanja, and this is in this article, she says they've got information that some powerful people are already lobbying MPs. And, you know, we should be worried as a nation that when this actually comes up for debate, you know, it'll not be the same, it will have been watered down. Do you think there's any foundation, though, to these fears by the TJRC?
Well, you know what TJRC is saying is really, it's common knowledge to every Kenyan who's had a chance to go through the report, or actually any Kenyan who knows what's happening in Kenya.
Yeah.
Because Kenya is run by special cartels, and the people mentioned in that report, I mean, one of them is a sitting president, one of them is a former president, all of them are rich people. They're the ones who sponsored majority of the members to Parliament. So there's no way we are going to treat this report in any manner. And also there's a terrain of numbers. I mean, what is likely to happen is there'll be 1 or 2 MPs from probably the minority side who will make a lot of noise. There'll be drama on that particular day, but the report will be buried. Because these cartels, the special interest groups, are the ones who are running the show. And when one of their own is under attack, all of them will run and protect him. So Namachanja is just telling us what you already know. I don't think whether our statements make any sense to the nation. I mean, we all know that. The report will go nowhere.
Yeah, there's big competing interests in this regard. All right, let's, you know, roll back to 1982, and on this day, there was a failed coup attempt in the country, and that's been extensively covered in the Standard today, pages 2 and 3, talking about how the events of this shaped the country and, you know, changed the narrative of our history. What are your thoughts? Where were you in 1982 on this day?
Well, I remember very clearly, 1982, I was in class 2 and I was on my way to church when the announcement came through. And obviously, I did not understand the implication. You know where I come from in Kisii, there's no military barrack. So you only get to see soldiers during the SK show. So when you're told soldiers have taken over the nation and you're a kid, you don't even know the implication. But reading, I mean, the history of the coup, I think what happened is President Moi was seen as a passing cloud. And I think the coup gave him the opportunity to restructure the system, to make sure that it serves his selfish interests. But in doing that, it became so excessive. And I think he created the room for people to say, no, we need a multi-party democracy. So for me, that would be my understanding of that situation.
Is this the time when, you know, he changed considerably? Because, you know, a lot has been said about him when he took over after Mzee Jomo Kenyatta died, and, you know, like they said, yes, he was presumptive. It was going to be that, you know, this would be the guy that would hold fort for a while. He was holding brief for somebody else. But even then, you know, all was nice and hunky-dory. And then after 1982, that, you know, things changed. We had a lot of heavy-handedness in that administration. Was this the turning point?
You know, I think people need to really understand and study Moi. I was patient. Because you recall, we are told for the 12 years he was a vice president, the Rift Valley provincial police officer would have the guts to stop him and say that I suspect you're carrying guns in your car. So, you know, they check him, and the poor president, vice president then, is on the roadside for, just like the guy at the airport, for 1 hour, waiting for the cops to do this. And they also changed the constitution group, which they want him to go to office automatically. So when he became the president, I think he was waiting for a certain moment, and probably had not figured out how he was going to do it. So when this one came, it gave him the opportunity. You recall after that he called for a snap election and ensured that it's only guys who are dancing to his drumbeat who took office. And then there was the Njonjo Commission, where so many people were named. And then he disbanded the Air Force and ensured that one of the key guys who crashed the coup, General Mohammed, was in charge of the Air Force. So I think this gave him the opportunity really to domesticate his ruling and ensure that everybody in any position of power was loyal to him.
Right, and knew he was the
man. And knew he was the president. Okay. And you recall that's when he started firing people at 1 o'clock bulletin. Yeah, that you'd go to set as early in the morning, like Professor Mbithi, have a cup of tea, even reshuffle the cabinet with him. But as soon as you get to your office, you get fired. I think that was really a turning point for the president. But I think the moral there is never ever underestimate any human being. Because you see, sometimes you are very meek and with a lot of humility because of the circumstances.
And then you push them
but
to
when
the
you get
wall.
the space, you run around and kick people.
All right.
I mean, a passing cloud. Just imagine a passing cloud which is static for 24 years. I mean, that's what Elijah Mwangale said. This guy is going to be a passing cloud. But he was there for 24 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
passing indeed.
It was static for 24 years.
Yes, indeed, passing indeed. But also, I think this also brought Raila Odinga perhaps to the forefront of Kenyans' minds. And perhaps this is something that he may never be able to get away from. What are your thoughts on now how it shaped Raila Odinga, you know, and bringing him to the public light, making him the man that he is today, or not?
You know, for him, he found a reason to engage in the so-called liberation with people like Paul Mwite, Anyang' Nyong'o, James Orengo, a number of guys who came. And even if there was not a coup, I would imagine nobody really wanted President Moi to rule the nation because, you know, he was seen to come from, I mean, if Dan Mofa Munduwaki was an outsider, so he had come to the party and invited, and he was given the biggest serving. So they're beginning to wonder, where does this guy come from? He's encroaching into our space. I would imagine with or without the coup, I mean, Raila would have still gone on to become the political hero he is today. But this one gave him the opportunity to come out because now he had a reason. He got detained. And I mean, when you see Raila talking about our liberation in Kenya, he does not forget to mention that I was detained because I was fighting for you. Which again is, it doesn't make a lot of sense because, I mean, the guys is telling that he was detained, that the Facebook guys were just 19 years old, so they don't understand you are detained what. And some of them would tell him that if you were around during that time, would have also been detained just like you, because we would have fought for this freedom. So you know that detention story, that we fought for freedom, does not fly anymore in the political space today.
We need to find a different, either a different way or, you know, just move on from that. But, you know, even when we talk about that coup, do you think that could be one of the things that holds a lot of people back when they take a look at Raila Odinga? Because I know that sentiment did come up, not in a big way, but, you know, in hushed tones in conversations during the campaigns before the March 4th election. And, you know, he led a coup, and therefore, you know, there's a lot of talk around that. Do you think that makes people think, well, I'm not sure we want him to lead the country now, seeing as he once tried to subvert the government?
No, that is a propaganda.
Or do you think that was just campaign propaganda?
Just a propaganda item. I mean, many Kenyans would have wanted to do what Raila did. Because I remember people growing up all over, that you'd like to have a political conversation. If you're seated in your house, your father would tell you, just take a walk around the compound to be sure there's nobody listening to us.
I remember
and then you engage a conversation. So there's so many men in Kenya who would have wanted to do what Raila did, but they didn't have the guts, they didn't have the passion to do it. So in fact, they envy him. That he did it shows that he's a man made of a different, you know, kind of a metal. And at that stage, he deserved a pat on the back. I mean, people are frustrated. Can you imagine that you wake up in the morning, you want to express your political view, and if the local KANU chairman doesn't like you, they suspend you and recommend that you get expelled. I mean, many careers, people like, if you remember Johnston Makau, Ken Matiba, a number of guys, by merely expressing your views, you get suspended, you get expelled, your bank balance suffers. I mean, at that time, Kenya Commercial Bank and National Bank are told to recall loans, most of them even fictitious. So who would really love me and say, oh man, this is a good guy? Everybody wanted to kick him out, but it's only Raila Odinga and a few guys who had guts. So anybody saying that because he participated in the attempted coup that he can't lead the nation, that's unacceptable.
All right. And I think, you know, it also marked the last time we had an execution, you know, putting somebody to death. That was with Hezekiah Ochuka for his role in that. But I distinctly remember after that, exactly what you said. Anytime there was any conversation, you know how the world had ears at the time, and they were called the special branch, I believe. And it was just that fear. If you wanted to say anything, you had no idea who you were sitting with. Sometimes even in extended families, you know, when we'd meet with cousins and everything, even in that space, you'd think, you know, special branch, special branch, special branch.
You know, even couples, I understand men who are politically active could not engage in a conversation with their spouses. Or the spouse, I mean, with the wife couldn't engage. You never know what's for the police. So the fact that, in my view, that Raila did this, that was a good thing. But that does not in any way mean that he needs to become a president. Because you see, I mean, you participated in that, but now the issues have changed. Today people are worried about jobs and insecurity. So even if you participated, you are detained for the longest time. That narrative now is dying. The people who saw you do that are in their late 50s and late 60s. Probably they don't even vote. The young Kenyan today is more excited about being told that Facebook is going to be free and Twitter is going to be free. So that is the message which is going to run.
Okay. Is there any way we can use this for the young people? Because I know, you know, obviously relating to the events of that, like we said, some were born, some were not, some were little children. But how can we make this part of our history in Kenya relevant? What is, I think, the take home from what happened in 1982 that can shape conversations about our democracy, about our politics, about our nation today?
For me, the thing which jumps to mind is that we are very lucky as a nation that we've got a disciplined force, which is in fact disciplined, that during the attempted coup, and you know, depending on who wrote the story, because you know they say history is written by the victors, so there are many versions. But at this stage, one needs to commend the military, especially General Mohammed, that acting on his own volition, he not wait for the president to tell him to crash the coup, but he went ahead and did it. So for me, I think we need to give our disciplined forces a part, and we need to celebrate our generals. Because if they wanted to comply with the guys at the Air Force, then maybe Kenya would have taken an entirely different turn. And we must really celebrate them and treat them with a lot of caution. And we start celebrating our soldiers. So that
by
we
paying
don't.
them.
Well, you know, they're part of our
Especially
society.
now that there's that whole
There's
issue
an
with the allowances.
Allowances, yeah. But again, you know, the retired General Tonje has done an amazing job at the military when he set up, like for instance, how long you can stay in one rank. They're taken good care of. So for me, I think really that's the lesson from the coup, that we have a disciplined force, which is regarded in the region. And you can see from the number of international assignments they're given. And even the level of education. And I think in the next few years, I mean, the Kenyan military is going to be, it will have the highest concentration of academic qualifications. Because right now, even if you join as a cadet without a bachelor's degree, before you get a promotion, you're supposed to get a certain degree, then you're required to get maybe a master's. You know, some of the generals today, if they lay down their profile, celebrated accountants, engineers, lawyers, geologists. Those guys can even go to Turkana and, you know, mine the oil with a lot of ease. So we really need to give them a pat on the back. But on the same note, we shouldn't take our democracy for granted. And even if President Moi at that stage behaved in a manner that I did not make the nation happy, I think really wanted to control us, because at that stage there was the Cold War. So there was a lot of money coming from Russia. Because the Russians wanted to get hold of Kenya as a key strategic nation. So there was money coming in, and the president was able to make sure that, as he normally would say, an island of peace. But in doing so, he stepped on people's toes. And maybe they're not very excited about that.
All right, okay. Some take-home lessons from that. But I think one thing we agree on is we're grateful that didn't take place. Because obviously, like we say, the narrative we'll be having today would be absolutely different.
I mean, it will be like the story of Nigeria. Now the generals will start competing. That the guy who organized this coup is from the Air Force. And because, you know, in Kenya, the army is larger than... I mean, has got a bigger, I don't know, a bigger force and a bigger presence than the Navy and the Air Force. So at some stage, a general seated at Kawa Barracks will say, no, how can this guy from the Air Force be the one who is running the show? He decides to take over. So we'll be having a chain of coups, you know, taking place, just like is happening in Egypt, which may not be a good idea.
Okay. So grateful at least for how that event turned out, that then shapes the space that we have today. Thank you for that. Dismas Mokua talking about several of the headlines in the papers today. Not forgetting on this day in 1982 was the abortive coup, and like we've been saying, discussing how that event shaped our history today and right now. Where were you in 1982? Were you born? If so, what do you remember of that time? No, it's, you know, it's a fair question. I mean, Kenya's population is, you know, predominantly young. So, but just to remember that these are some of the greatest events we had in the country. And by greatest, I mean had an impact one way or another. Okay, so that's been a look at the press. So therefore, there's a lot for you to read. If you're not born in 1982, please get a copy of The Standard today. You'll be able to get a feel of what that time was like in the country. We want to take a short break right now, and we thank Dismas Makwa for joining us at this early hour to take a look at those headlines. But we want to remind you that after this, any questions that you have regarding the Higher Education Loans Board, have you taken a loan? Are you paying it back? Do you want to get one? Are your records not in order? All these questions that you have regarding the Higher Education Loans Board will be answered in a short while after this break. So just stay with us.